It's too bad. We have to deal with facts now. We have to put on our big people pants and deal with facts. That's not evidence for an invisible magic man in the sky. I'm discounting that you said, I feel awe, therefore God. Religion does nothing but take the credit for the accomplishments of the people or the society in order to legitimize itself. We as a society need to look at evidence and reason. Religion is a scam, believers are victims, and it's a good thing to help people away from it. Come to a conclusion based on facts. Religion is a worldwide force for promoting yesteryear's prejudice. And the amount of evidence for religion equals the amount of evidence for tarot card readers and other scams and psychics. Zero.
I'm Nathan Rich, aka Wang. Today I want to introduce you to a special guest. David Silverman is a renowned atheist who runs a YouTube channel called Firebrand for Good. We had a very long chat together over Skype. In the beginning, we talked about China, and that's this video. David was one of those victims of the Me Too movement in which he was accused of all kinds of random things. And to the best of my knowledge, all of those have been thoroughly debunked. And if you want to find out more information about how thoroughly those were debunked, I recommend that you check out a video by a channel called AIU, Atheism is Unstoppable. A man named Devin Tracy runs that channel, and I don't agree with everything that Devin says, but he does do a very good job of busting apart some of these allegations and showing just how fraudulent they were. So if you come across that type of thing with David, you should know that those things have been debunked as far as I know. These videos were recorded very, very late my time and very, very early his time, so we're both actually pretty tired. So if we seem sluggish, that's why, but I think it was a pretty good conversation, so take a look.
Okay, so tell me about yourself, Nathan.
I was raised in LA. I was born and raised right across the street from the Scientology Celebrity Center. My entire family was Scientologists, and so I was raised to very strongly believe in Scientology. When I was very young, I started rejecting that idea, and long story short, I got sent away multiple times, and then I ended up being disowned by my family and lived on the streets homeless for many years. And then eventually I was able to get out of that life and start building something up for myself. I got into technology. Eventually I became like a systems administrator and then a network administrator, systems architect. And I just worked up from there. I became a director of technology, got into the visual effects industry, and ended up moving to China for the first time in 2012 as a director of technology at a visual effects company, and traveled around Asia for a while and ended up living back in China around 2014. And I served as the chief technology officer for a major visual effects company here, and now I'm a CTO at another company here in Beijing. I started making videos about China in November of 2018. Dolce & Gabbana had made a video series that was meant to advertise their upcoming Shanghai runway show, and it was very patronizing of Chinese people. So I made a kind of response video to that where I parodied their video, and that video got 20 million views in the first 24 hours, and by the time it had gone away, it got about 100 million views. And I had spent so much time trying to express my views about China and about sort of geopolitics to my friends. They kind of got sick of hearing about it, and they kept saying, like, just make some videos about it. And that video did well, so I just decided I'm going to start talking about how I see things. The basic gist of it is, I think China has a lot of issues, but most of the issues that, let's just say, the West focuses on are very distorted in the way that they report them and the way that they talk about them. It helps to create this environment that I feel like I was a part of in the United States and other countries, where we view China in a certain way, and I don't think that that way is accurate. You know, I've kind of undertaken this challenge of trying to express my views about why I love China, why I think it's amazing, and kind of not let them get away with too much in what they're saying about China, forcing them to have the burden of proof. And you know, you need to prove what you're saying. You can't just, oh, everybody knows this, and now, of course, they're this way and they're that way. It's a very toxic way to talk about China. So that's kind of where I'm at now. That's the abbreviated version of my life.
So if you were to talk to somebody, you know, brand new on my channel, who's I mean, I've been to China several times, and I also love China. And even though I don't speak a word of Chinese, well, 3 or 4 words maybe. What do you think, before we get into the meat of the discussion, because I want to talk about your religious views and how religion works in China from your perspective and from your mind's perspective, but what do you think is like the biggest misconception that Americans have about China? Like the biggest,
wow.
other than the fact that the food there is so much better and so much different than the Chinese food here. What is what's like the biggest thing that sticks in your craw the most?
Well, the motivations of Chinese people as a whole, as a populace, are very, very misunderstood by the West, I think, myself included when I was in America. I and other people that I've observed in America tend to view China from a very Eurocentric lens. We have this history, you and I, of a scale of the worst thing in the world is a Nazi, and the best thing in the world is a globalized society where everyone is totally free from everything in this certain way, and Christianity is this level of bad and good, and all these things, freedom is this, means this thing, and democracy has this value to it, and communism is bad because of this, and all these sort of cultural understandings, but we tend to view them as absolute objective truths. And one thing that I learned when I really started traveling the world is that some of those, may be fair to call those, but it is a lot more relative than we understand because, America's been around since 1781 is when it federated. And in that time in China, from that time to now, they call that modern history. That's not even like the main part of their history. So they've been around forever. And it's very little takes into account of how they view us. It's a lot of like, to the degree that they're not like us, they're wrong mentality. And so I think that really the most fundamental thing that Westerners don't understand or misunderstand about China, Chinese people, the Chinese government is the historical precedents versus present time motivations. What do they actually care about and how do they live their lives? I think is very wildly misunderstood.
Wow. Okay, cool. So, when I was there, I wrote a book, Fighting God, and I went to China 3 times to give 3 different talks on the book. And what I used to say was that Mao Zedong didn't actually go far enough, that he abolished religion. He said that religion is the opiate of the masses. I don't think he was the first to say that, but he did say that. And he pushed away religion because it was dangerous to the people, and he was right to do that. But he didn't push away things like ghosts, like numerology, like astrology, which also used the same methodology to hurt people, to hurt citizens. So I was wondering what your take is on religion in China, being an insider, being somebody who lives there, and being somebody who used to be in a cult. So you can see it. And we haven't gotten to your personal ideas yet, but tell me a little bit about your perspective of religious and pseudoscientific identity in China. What's going on there?
Sure. So another part about when I was growing up, as is very common in Scientology, is there was chiropractors in my family. My uncle was a chiropractor. His brother was a chiropractor. Homeopathy was very big. Kinesiology, you know what I'm talking about? The thing where they tell you, where they hold the thing against your chest and all that thing where they're testing your allergies supposedly and all this stuff. So I was already kind of familiar with this alternative medicine type of concept and traditional Chinese medicine. Home remedies was big in the 90s when I was growing up. And so I've kind of had exposure to that in the West, where obviously, it still exists. And in China, I found it was quite surprising how different it was than I thought it would be. In some ways, it was much, much stronger, this concept of let's say, alternative medicines, traditional Chinese medicine. I mean, I was surprised that they actually used traditional Chinese medicine in China. For some reason, I just thought that wasn't a thing. But when you get here, you find it's real. It's very real. It's in every hospital. In the professional industry, they use it as a supplementary treatment. It's not like they give you surgery and say, here, eat these leaves and you'll be fine. They give you the proper stuff, but they also give you those leaves. Okay. So that is all throughout China. And as far as like mysticism and that kind of stuff, more, what's it called, Sedona, Arizona, this like more Arizona-ish type of stuff. There's a very, very long history of that in China, as long as anybody can even think of. So it's very deep-rooted in its history. And there are definitely some practices that Chinese people do. When I say Chinese people, I don't mean all. I mean mostly like small town or, certain pockets will do that we would think of as quackery. But the other side to that people can get a little bit wrong is that some of that stuff has some use. Like cloves actually can make your gums numb. Like there's a little bit of that actually does some helpful stuff. But obviously, when you get into the realm of replacing treatment with this type of stuff, then it becomes dangerous. As far as the average sort of Chinese person that I talk to, they believe strongly in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, but they also believe strongly in Western medicine. Like I said, they sort of just combine it. Ghosts, there are definitely, there's an undercurrent of a sort of, ghosts could be real or they might be real. You'll hear a story here and there about, this subway stop was closed forever because somebody thought there was ghosts there. But the most sort of superstitious stuff that I've come across is really, praying to ancestors, which is, it's not really to the level of belief that we could call it, a cult or a religion, because it's not like they spend their days thinking about this. It's just a holiday that comes up and they go and they donate to their ancestors out of honor and respect. So I've traveled a lot of China. I've been to somewhere around 30 cities or so, and I've met a lot of people from different walks of life, and that kind of stuff is definitely around, but it's not like a pervasive thing.
So I had heard a story that that you had to have a license plate before you could buy a car in Beijing, and that there's a line to get license plates, but there's no line if you don't mind a license plate with a 4 in it. And that there's people lining up waiting for license plates that don't have 4s in it.
You're kind of talking about two things there. The license plate thing is not a China thing, it's a Beijing thing, because this city has at various times between 20 and 30 million people. So
I'm not throwing shade on the license plate thing, right?
Yeah, but I just want people to understand why this happens, is that you have to have a license. And by the way, also, you can't drive your car 7 days a week. They give you a random day of the week that you just can't drive your car. So you can only drive it 6 days. And that's mostly because of the traffic, also the pollution. It's a huge, huge mega metropolis, the likes of, Americans have never seen if they haven't really traveled throughout Asia. And the number 4, right, the pronunciation of 4 is si, which is, S-I in the 4th tone. And si is die or death. Okay, so that's a different word. Also phonetically S-I, but with a different tone. And it's a kind of a, salt over the shoulder type of thing in the Chinese culture that you don't want to be identified with 4. It's kind of like the number 13 in America, right? Where you go to a hotel and they don't have a 13th floor.
Right.
Why? Well, because no one wants to, some people, but a lot of people don't want to stay on the 13th floor because why risk it? And so that you have a lot of buildings that don't have a 4th floor. You have that type of thing with license plates. But you also have the inverse of that, by the way. So the number 8 is a very lucky number, right? So you'll see a lot of people trying to get 8s. If you see a commercial for the number, 1-888-888, they paid a lot of money for that. It's a two-way street.
So do you have 4s on your license plate?
No, I always rode motorcycles in America, and here I just don't even drive. I just have a driver take me, or it's just not my thing. I got in a pretty bad accident on a motorcycle and damaged my body permanently, and so I'm not a motorcycle guy anymore either.
I understand that. So do you think I was right to say that Mao Zedong didn't go far enough?
Well, when the Communist Party started in 1921, at that point, the worst thing that had ever happened to China in any sort of count of deaths type of way had happened just 60 years beforehand, and that was a massive Christian uprising. And as many or more people died in that than all of World War II, all of the countries combined. So you have to understand that this guy, right, Mao Zedong, is growing up in an environment where he's looking around and he sees this guy's got a sign on his door for good luck, and this guy is superstitious about that. But it's not killing anyone. No one's dying because they don't have a fourth floor of a building, right? Maybe it's wonky and wacky, but it's not killing you. Meanwhile, Christianity at that time had been a huge factor. And so there's definitely a situation where we have to remember the context that he was in. If I were living in those days, I wouldn't think that superstition about numbers or, burning sage and whatever, I wouldn't think that was a very high priority either. Now, having said that, he did actually do a lot to try to get rid of superstitions from the past. There was a cultural revolution which happened many years later. It's one of those moments that you look back on in history and go, well, that seems like it was kind of a mistake, And very touchy subject, but it caused a lot of deaths, a lot of sort of regrettable destruction of things. But one of the things that they went after is this type of superstitious stuff. In the early days of communist China, people were not superstitious. I mean, they didn't even, the emperor was put in prison. Like all that stuff was gone. Was it still in their minds? Maybe, probably. But he did go pretty far in that.
Wow. So when he was pushing against religion, he wasn't pushing against it for the opiate of the masses and controlling the people thing. He was pushing against it because organized Christianity was a threat to the state.
I think he was pushing back for both reasons, but I'm trying to give you some idea of why he would probably care more about organized religion than about superstitious beliefs and acupuncture and whatever, that kind of stuff, because those are not necessarily harmless, but when you stack them up against 70 million dead people, you don't care. It doesn't. It's just an afterthought to get rid of those. It has declined over the years. Even since I've been here, it's gone down a bit. So it is kind of getting less and less. To me, this is one of those areas where when I think about the progress of China and how people talk about it and think about it, I kind of just go, yeah, but just wait a few years. Like, it's getting better. It's trending in the right direction. So it's not really a big point to kind of go after it. It's not like it's booming and everybody's getting into new agey stuff,
That's good. I remember people when I spoke to that topic, people reacted in an excited manner. It was like something that nobody else was talking about. That they were excited to hear somebody actually speaking up against astrology and prayer to ghosts and stuff like that. Is that something that you believe is not a hill worth dying on at all in China?
For you or for me?
For anyone. Is it harmful?
Well, like I said, I think it's trending downwards because China's a very generationally changing country. The generation that's in power now is very different than the younger generation, and they're also different than their parents. And so this kind of stuff is mostly more common with somebody's grandfather thinks that way. Maybe their father thinks that way. And the new kids, they don't really think this way. So I personally, I don't even try to ask questions anymore. I just, okay. So personally, I don't think this is a big issue anymore, but that's just me.
So there you have it. This is just the first portion of a conversation that David and I had, and I think it went pretty well. It's very interesting to hear his questions and comments about China. It's clear to me that he has been to China several times, and there's definitely things he appreciates about China that other people might not. For example, that it's a predominantly secular society. He enjoys that, and it sounds like he had a lot of fun when he was here. So hopefully he'll come out and we can go get some hot pot together. So thanks, everybody. 谢谢。